condense it into 60 seconds. I can use multiple shorter sources cross-referenced between one another and get reliable information I can fit into the 60 seconds and probably do it all in less than an hour. But if I was doing a longer video on the Wrangel Island mammoths, I would go into much more research because I'd actually have the time to talk about all of it. But I want to take a look at the claim that it takes you 2 hours to research the conspiracy theory videos, because that makes me wonder to myself, what kind of research are you doing? In my videos on you, I research the exact same topics that you claim to have researched. Let's take the Bosnian pyramids, for example. I pushed this one really hard in my video on you because I think it is the worst thing you have ever created. In this couple-minute video, you talk about the Bosnian pyramid conspiracy theory as if it were fact. In doing so, you belittle and vilify actual archaeologists and scientists who have studied the site. You fail to provide any of the mountain of evidence that it is not a pyramid. You validate and applaud the con man who opened it and is now raking in millions of dollars, including from the government, by doing so missing an opportunity to talk about Bosnia's actual national heritage, which is in a museum that is still in ruins after a fucking war. And to cap it all off, this video of yours has more than 30 million views. You promoted what could be considered an actual government conspiracy theory run by a business con man to 30 million people. To try and undo some of the damage you did with this, Philip, I had to research the exact same topic as well. And in my 2 hours, hell, in my first 30 minutes of research, I was not only able to find sparse evidence supporting any of the things you're saying, but literal mountains of evidence proving that what you are saying is wrong. And Philip, this is the case for every single other pseudo-archaeology topic of yours that I discussed across both of my videos. I have a hard time believing you didn't stumble across some of the loads of evidence that all of these theories have against them in your 2 hours of research. Now, this puts you in a bit of a tricky situation. My gut response is that you aren't actually doing 2 hours of research, but I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. If you are actually doing these 2 hours of research, I see 2 explanations for how you are failing to mention any of this important information. 1, you're cherry-picking sources. You see things that go against the research that you're doing and then just don't read them, which is not only not good research, but also academic dishonesty. The worst option is that in these 2 hours of research, you are reading the same sources that I am and then just not telling your audience, which is not only academic dishonesty, but a lie of omission. Both of these are pretty bad, and I don't know which one's more likely, but I actually have a third option that I'd be willing to put money on. The only other explanation I can think of for how you don't present any of the evidence against the things you are saying is that your 2 hours of research is listening to a fucking podcast or something, which is, and I cannot stress this enough, not fucking research. Spending 2 hours listening to Randall Carlson or Terrence Howard blabber on Joe Rogan is not even close to fucking research. Research is learning about a topic by pulling from multiple independent sources, cross-checking them amongst one another, and being able to draw a conclusion from it. I think that the anti-intellectualism peddled by conspiracy theory YouTube channels and podcasts are your pitfall. And that's not just me speculating. You actually give me pretty good reason to believe that this is the case in just a few minutes. So, to summarize, if you are doing actual research, you are admitting to leaving out information that you would have to be aware of if you even did a surface-level dive into any of these topics, and by proxy, lying to your audience. And if you aren't doing this, then you're admitting that you think that listening to the Joe Rogan Experience counts as academic research. Now again, these options are just speculation, but regardless of how much you defend your research process, the fact still remains that I was able to prove that the things you are saying are false, and you have not addressed it. So maybe, Philip, in the future, a little Google debunking would go a long way. In this video, you seem to try and logic your way out of the facts that I brought up. As much as I genuinely hate to do this, you kind of leave me no choice but to talk about logical fallacies. A fallacy is when someone uses a piece of faulty reasoning to try and make an argument sound more valid. Fallacies are something that everyone can fall into. I have fallen into them, and I will again. This is because they are almost human second nature. You almost have to train your brain to not fall into the trap of fallacies. Because of this, I typically don't harp on fallacies all that often, because I think it's kind of a cheap shot, and debasing an argument based on the fact that it contains a fallacy is actually a fallacy called the fallacy. That being said, if an argument sucks and is completely full of fallacies, I am absolutely going to bring it up. And Philip, since you didn't actually address any of the points that I made and went on the defensive, you wandered straight into a fallacy minefield. You claim to be a supporter of facts and logic, but facts don't really seem to have been doing it for you, so I'm going to appeal to your logic instead. Let's start with one that I just brought up, the cherry-picking fallacy. Drink for every fallacy in Phil's response video. The cherry-picking fallacy is when you only gather sources that support the thing you're trying to say. Whether your source is podcasts, YouTube videos, or actual research, there's clearly some cherry-picking going on here, Philip. Okay, with that example out of the way, let's get into some of the big ones.
Everyone needs to know that these are just theories. They may or may not be true. Hell, the same could even be said about my regular fact videos. The idea that you are Stardust is technically just a theory.
Firstly, yes, Philip, these are just theories and everyone needs to know that they may or may not be true. And you are not communicating that to your audience. That's what I'm talking about here, Jesus. Well, let's talk about this one, because I love this one. Hey, this whole Stardust thing is just a theory as well. This is a classic argument used by science deniers and anti-intellectuals to debase well-proven and well-supported scientific theories because they're just theories. It's something used to belittle actual scientific research in order to make conspiracy and speculation seem more plausible and valid. It is also a false equivalency fallacy. The false equivalency fallacy is like saying that apples and tomatoes are the same thing because they're a fruit. They are, in fact, both fruit, but I wouldn't put a tomato in a fucking fruit salad. Claiming that a well-supported, peer-reviewed scientific theory is equivalent to the theory that Admiral Byrd flew into the hollow earth based on a book written in Comic fucking Sans is so ridiculous, I have a hard time believing you even think that.
I found it. This is the book he was talking about. Look at that. Real fucking reliable source here, Phil. Wow. Doing your own research. The only academic sources I trust are ones that have 4 exclamation points after each other.
This is also a bit of the faulty analogy fallacy. Claiming that two things are alike because of one similarity. Claiming that these two things have even close to the same amount of credibility based on the fact that they are both just theories is absolutely ridiculous.
We may currently have more evidence that supports it, which is why we accept it as a fact, but we also might gain new knowledge, say 100 years from now, that proves it to be wrong.
Another classic anti-intellectualism talking point. Well, science has been wrong before. This is a variation of the continuum fallacy. An argument that states that two different conditions cannot be different because between them there exists a whole spectrum of conditions. When someone uses this line of reasoning, it illustrates to me that they are at least partly ignorant how science actually operates. It is very likely that something like star formation will be better understood and refined as we have better tools and technology in the future. But it's all building off of pre-existing evidence and research. Rarely is science as binary as it's right or it's wrong. That just isn't how this works. If the Stardust theory was proven wrong in Philip's eyes, it probably wouldn't actually mean that it's wrong. Rather, it's been refined, developed, and improved in order to incorporate new evidence. This could also be the faulty generalization fallacy, where a conclusion is drawn about many things based on one example. This is like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Just because scientific theories are open to being refined, understood, developed, and changed does not mean it makes sense to look at all of them as if they will be proven wrong. Especially when you're using this as justification to talk about the Bosnian pyramids as if they were fact, because they're both just theories. I was doing some work with none other than the Flint Dibble back a few weeks ago, and he used an excellent analogy. Have you ever taken a high-level math class? Because I absolutely have not. If there's one thing in this world that I absolutely suck at, it is math. But I have been told that in high-level math classes, you can get points on a question that you got wrong because you got a lot of the formula correct. Let's say that there's a math problem with 10 steps to solve. You get 1 point for every step you get correct for a grand total of 10 points. I'm gonna play devil's advocate and say that the Stardust theory isn't entirely correct, but it would probably get like 8 points. Even though the end could be refined, the fundamentals are there, and there's room for improvement. Thus is the nature of science. The Bosnian pyramid theory, on the other hand, is like showing up to the exam pissed drunk, vomiting on the test, and turning it in anyway. And you are implying that both of these tests should be taken equally seriously because neither of them got the final equation correct.
Which is why I talk about both factual scientific topics and controversial mysterious theories.
Yes, and you talk about them interchangeably. That's the problem here. You make very clear here that you know the distinction between the fact videos and the conspiracy videos, but you seem to make almost no effort to make this distinction clear to your audience. And I'm sorry, but assuming that people are going to be able to tell the difference on their own isn't good enough. Whether you like it or not, having a large audience alone makes people view you as an authority figure. You have over 1.5 million followers, Philip. People will listen to the things you say. You have a responsibility to your audience that when you talk about these conspiracy theories, you make clear that they have been widely, scientifically disproven.
Say we banish the crazy, evil Giza power plant theory from ever being discussed, and 1,000 years from now, I don't know, build a time machine that allows us to prove with a higher degree of certainty that maybe a part of that theory was true. We'll look back the last 1,000 years and be like, oh gee, we sure lost a lot of progress on learning from that theory when we banned it from being discussed back in 2024.
Wait, I'm sorry, who's saying we banned this from being discussed? If I'm remembering correctly, I was actually interested in that. In fact, I actually bought this very book for that video and said I was going to read it. Now, I wouldn't expect you to know that because I don't think you actually watched my videos, but if you did, you would see how funny it is that you use this as an example of something that I'm trying to silence. I literally gave the author of this book money, something I am not encouraging anyone else to do, by the way. Do as I say, not as I do. Also, if we did invent a time machine, go back and look at the pyramid and figure out it was a power plant, then that would be actual scientific evidence. Right now, there's just really no evidence for it, so why are we going to treat it as if there is?